The rain fell in sheets that night, each droplet pounding against my shoulders like 100 tiny reproaches. I stood on the curb outside Marcus's basement apartment, the glow of the single bare bulb above the doorway flickering against puddles that mirrored my racing thoughts. My hoodie was soaked through, hair plastered to my forehead, but I barely noticed the chill. Emma was inside, Emma, whose laugh once felt like sunlight. After 6 months apart, I wasn't sure if I was stepping into a reunion or a reckoning. Marcus's door swung open with a whoosh of warmth and stale beer. The beat of low electronic music vibrated through the wooden steps as I descended, each step creaking to announce my arrival. Faces I knew only by name glanced up and back to their cups. In this dim, half-lit world, I felt strangely exposed, like an exhibit under an unfair spotlight. Sam waved from the corner, half hidden in shadow, his face a mask of encouragement and worry. I forced a grin. "Thanks for saving me a spot," I said, voice husky with nerves. He shrugged and returned to his drink, leaving me to thread my way through a maze of mismatched couches and soda cans. The air tasted of cheap liquor and regret, and every breath felt like inhaling someone else's mistakes. The crowd parted, almost reverently, as I approached the back corner where Emma leaned against the graffiti-scrawled wall. Her hair was darker now, falling in waves that caught the flicker of red emergency lights. Her profile was perfect. Strong cheekbones, a small curve to her lips that suggested secrets. My heart thudded, as it always did, and for a moment I forgot to breathe. She glanced at me, eyes smooth and guarded, and in that instant I saw a barrier I hadn't expected. Then she turned her head, voice loud enough for me to hear, and everyone around her to smirk. "He's great and all, but honestly, you'll never be enough to make up for what I lost." Time stopped. The beat of the music flattened into a dull thump somewhere far away. My chest tightened until it felt like breath was a luxury I could no longer afford. The laughter around her swelled, cruel and hollow. I searched her face for a flicker of regret, but she looked away as though labeling me ludicrous had been the most natural thing in the world. My hands curled into fists, knuckles white beneath the fabric. Sam's voice cut through my daze. "Ignore her, man." He grabbed my shoulder, but I shoved him away with more force than intended. "No," I said, voice trembling. "I need to know why." I stepped forward, every nerve alight. "Emma, what did you mean by that?" The words tore from my throat. She turned fully then, her gaze cool and distant. "I meant exactly what I said. You'll never fill that hole." Her words were a stone dropped in my chest, sinking me deeper than any rainstorm could. The hole she mentioned was the shadow of loss she carried, a loss I had never fully understood and that she refused to share. Memories flashed. The midnight drives we took when laughter faded into contemplative silence. The nights she leaned on my shoulder, whispering fears she claimed she'd never voiced out loud. Where had all that gone? I opened my mouth to argue, to plead, but no sound emerged. She smirked, as if my silence proved her right, and slipped away through the crowd before I could catch her arm. I stood alone in the neon haze, ears ringing with echoes of her voice. Anger burned low in my gut, mingled with the sting of betrayal. I closed my eyes and saw every promise I'd made, to support her, to stay by her side, to build something lasting, crumble like cheap plaster. The world tilted, and I wobbled on my feet. When I found myself back on the sidewalk, rain still drumming overhead, a fierce resolve cracked open inside me. No longer would I be defined by her fear or her pain. I would forge a new path, one untainted by her doubts. The sticky note I tore from my shirt, once an absent-minded scrap, now read like a declaration of war: "Build her words small." Under the jaundiced glow of the street lamp, I pressed my palm against the cold metal pole and whispered to the darkness, "You won't break me." The rain washed over me, but inside I was dry, alight with purpose. Tonight was more than a party. tonight was the moment my life turned in a new direction, a turning point born from the sting of cruelty. I squared my shoulders, squared my jaw, and walked away from the party knowing that whatever came next, I would meet it head-on, shaped by resolve instead of ruin. The morning after receiving the court summons, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by stacks of folders and legal pads, each page filled with scrawled notes that felt like lifelines. My lawyer, Carla Martinez, arrived with a resolve in her eyes and immediate questions. Who saw him lying? What evidence do we have? I handed over dozens of email printouts and a USB drive of texts that traced his fabrications from the first moment he began smearing my reputation. Carla paced the small apartment, phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with private investigators and experts who would testify on everything from my mental health to his pattern of deception. Each new detail she unearthed felt like a small victory, but also a reminder of how deep his campaign of lies went, and how much I stood to lose if any piece slipped through the cracks. I watched her list potential witnesses: my best friend who overheard his threats, the barista who recorded our final argument on security footage, and even the neighbor who noted his suspicious late-night visits. For every ally we recruited, there was a moment of heartbreak as they recounted his cruelty, the whispered doubts he planted in my mind, the late-night calls where he insisted I was imagining things, and the public rumors he spread like wildfire. By midday, Carla leaned over the laptop to show me a timeline she'd constructed, my moments of apparent weakness cast in a manipulative light, spaced out alongside his calculated accusations. She highlighted the emails he wrote to mutual friends, playing the hero before shifting blame onto me, emails we planned to present as evidence of his intent to vilify me in the eyes of everyone we knew. I gulped as I realized how orchestrated each move was. Every lie was a brick in his fortress of falsehoods, and it would take laser focus to dismantle it in open court. But with Carla's steady guidance, I began to see a pattern: his rage after I refused to reconcile, his text messages confessing his fear that I'd expose his secrets, and the sudden appearance of witnesses who hadn't existed before the dispute. We drafted subpoenas for key emails, depositions with character witnesses, and a motion to suppress any psychiatric evaluations he'd weaponized against me, an attempt to paint my legitimate concerns as delusions. As Carla spoke each legal term, motion to dismiss, burden of proof, direct examination, I felt empowerment coursing through me, a sensation I hadn't felt since she called me credible instead of crazy. Late that afternoon, the private investigator called with a breakthrough: security footage from the bar where he'd yelled at me in public, footage that perfectly contradicted his claim that I'd been the aggressor. Watching the grainy video, I saw him loom over me, voice raised and finger pointed, while I stood frozen, hands open and pleading, an image I prepared to show the judge should he insist on his narrative. Carla smiled grimly. "We'll use this to expose his perjury on the stand. He won't know what hit him," she said, as though wielding a secret weapon. My heart clenched at the thought of facing him in that small, fluorescent-lit room, but I also felt a fierce pride, knowing that each truth we presented would chip away at his wall of lies. I pictured the gallery filled with faces I once knew, friends, family, colleagues, whatever remained after his defamation would now witness my vindication. The weight of his words no longer felt like shackles, but rather stepping stones, each lie we disproved renewing my faith in justice and in myself. That evening I drafted the outline for my testimony, pinpointing crucial moments where his falsehoods clashed with facts I could prove, with documents and credible witnesses. I practiced in front of the bathroom mirror, voice steady and eyes unwavering, asserting the truth instead of apologizing for daring to stand my ground. My reflection no longer showed a doubtful woman, but someone tempered by adversity, equipped to confront a courtroom full of skeptics and sway them with incontrovertible evidence. Carla reviewed my draft, tightening phrasing so every sentence would resonate clearly. I did not threaten him. I sought peace. I did not distort the truth. I pursued the truth when he obscured it. Her edits made each statement crisp and unassailable, transforming my personal narrative into a structured, fact-based account that would leave no room for misinterpretation. I felt the shift from victim to advocate, my voice rising from a whisper of fear to a declaration of resolve that no false accusation could silence. As I closed my laptop, the city lights flickering through the window reflected a landscape of possibility rather than the darkness I'd feared. I realized that proving my sanity meant more than just winning in court. It meant reclaiming my identity from the rubble of his lies and forging a version of myself unshakable by others' opinions. Tomorrow we would file our motions and schedule depositions, and soon I'd stand in a judicial chamber where truth and justice would collide with falsehood and manipulation. Every late-night call, every painstaking deposit of evidence, and every rehearsal in the mirror led to this moment, a chance to watch his lies collapse under the weight of incontrovertible proof. In the hush before dawn, I whispered a vow to myself, and to every person who believed me. I am not crazy. I am a witness to my own truth, and I will not be silenced. With that promise in my heart, I drifted to sleep, ready for the next chapter in a battle that would test my sanity and define my freedom. The morning of the trial arrived with a brittle chill in the courtroom's grand hall, where sunlight slanted through tall windows and dust motes danced like silent witnesses. I adjusted my suit jacket at the defense table, heart drumming a steady rhythm of determination rather than dread. Carla Martinez, calm and composed, leaned in and whispered, "Remember, we control the narrative. Focus on facts, not emotions." The bailiff's gavel echoed, silencing the murmurs as Judge Hayes took the bench, her robes whispering authority with every shift. From the plaintiff's table, my ex stared back, eyes alight with the same cold triumph that had fueled his smear campaign. But now, those embers would be extinguished by evidence rather than words. Opening statements began with my attorney, outlining the timeline and central issue, a deliberate pattern of lies designed to undermine my reputation and sanity. When Carla described the barista's security footage, showing him shouting threats while I held my hands up in calm defense, the courtroom gasped as the video flickered on the screen. My ex's lawyer leaned forward, brow furrowed, but Carla's steady voice walked the jury through each timestamp, pointing out the moments where his claims directly contradicted recorded facts. I watched the jury's posture shift from curiosity to attentive disbelief as he realized his carefully constructed fortress of falsehoods was crumbling brick by brick. Next came direct examination of my friend Alan, who recounted how he overheard my ex bragging about destroying her mentally during a late-night call. Alan's voice trembled at first, but Carla guided him to deliver each detail with clarity. The date, time, and exact words that revealed malicious intent. On cross-examination, my ex attempted to dismiss Alan as biased, but Carla produced phone records showing their messages confirming his statements, turning an attack into another testament to consistency. That moment of hesitation on my ex's face was the first crack in his armor, and I felt a current of triumph pulse through me. The turning point came during Carla's cross-examination of the private investigator, who presented emails from my ex to mutual friends, portraying himself as the victim of my alleged erratic behavior. Each email was a masterpiece of manipulation until Carla highlighted the metadata proving they were drafted after his threats, exposing the emails as post-fabrication rather than genuine grievance. Judge Hayes leaned forward, tapping her pen as she reviewed the printed evidence, and I sensed the pendulum of sympathy swinging decisively in my favor. When it was my turn to testify, I rose with steady resolve, meeting my ex's gaze without flinching. I recounted our relationship's arc, moments of genuine care overshadowed by his growing anger whenever I questioned his behavior. I described the late-night conversations where he insisted I was unstable, only to discover later he had recorded those calls and edited them to sound like I'd been the aggressor. My voice quivered only once, when I spoke of the shame that had silenced me for far too long, but Carla's encouraging nod brought it back to a clear, unwavering tone. On cross-examination, my ex's attorney grilled me relentlessly, twisting innocuous comments into supposed evidence of paranoia. But I held my ground, answering each question with succinct truth, backed by documents and witness accounts. When he asked about one ambiguous text message, I calmly explained the context and showed the unedited thread, another lie laid bare by factual clarity. A hush fell as Carla asked her final question. "Do you have any doubt that he sought to manipulate you at every turn?" I paused, then answered firmly, "Not for a second." Judge Hayes nodded and turned to the jury, instructing them to weigh the evidence, not emotion, a charge that felt like a guiding light for justice. As closing arguments began, Carla's voice resonated through the hushed courtroom, weaving together the evidence into a tapestry of truth that left no space for his deceit. She reminded the jury of every email timestamp, every testimony, and the security footage, urging them to deliver a verdict that would restore my name and sanity. When the bailiff once again struck the gavel, announcing the jury's deliberation, I felt a whirlwind of anxiety, tempered by the knowledge that each piece of truth we'd presented was irrefutable. The weight felt timeless, every second stretching into an eternity until finally the jury filed back in, faces solemn and resolved. Judge Hayes read the verdict with deliberate clarity, unanimous in favor of the defense, recognizing the plaintiff's claims as willful misrepresentation and affirming the defendant's credibility. Relief washed over me in a surge so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. Not of defeat, but of vindication, proof that lies could not withstand the crucible of truth. As I gathered my things, my ex sat slumped, the smugness in his eyes replaced by stunned regret, a silent acknowledgement of his downfall. Walking out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun, I felt reborn, no longer defined by his accusations, but by my unwavering conviction and the justice that had finally set me free. The morning after the verdict, sunlight felt like a cleansing flood as I stepped out of the courthouse, arms wrapped around the stack of case files I'd carried in like armor. Traffic hummed on the street beyond the grand stone steps, but the noise seemed distant. My world had narrowed to this singular triumph. Reporters' flashes popped behind me, voices trailed off in congratulatory blur, and I let the reality of justice wash over me like warm rain, dispelling the chill of doubt that had shadowed every step I took before today. Back at my apartment, messages flooded in from friends, family, and colleagues, some I hadn't heard from since the accusations began. Each "I'm so proud, and I knew you were telling the truth" was a brick in the foundation I was rebuilding. My phone buzzed again, a notification from the local paper with a headline that read, "Defamed no more, her name restored." I tapped the link, anticipating vindication praise, but instead found a crater of sensational quotes from my ex's lawyer slagging off the lopsided verdict. My chest tightened as a familiar knot of anger and sadness sprang to life, but I willed myself to breathe through it. Let the liars rant in their echo chamber. My truth was already spoken. Later that afternoon, an envelope arrived, my ex's handwritten apology and retraction delivered by a paralegal. In his shaky script, he admitted to uncontrolled bitterness and begged forgiveness for the pain he'd caused. My thumb hovered over the page as memories of his charm flickered between the lines of betrayal. I folded the letter and tucked it away, an artifact of closure, not a means to reconciliation. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to remind you of the distance you've crossed. That evening, I met with Carla at the small cafe where we'd first discussed strategy. She raised her coffee cup in a toast. To truth, finally spoken. I clinked my paper cup against hers, soul buoyed by a gratitude I couldn't fully articulate. We reviewed possibilities for pursuing damages, compensatory for reputational harm, punitive to discourage future lies. But mostly we laughed at the absurdity that this battle began with a lie calling me crazy. Today, that insult had melted away under the weight of my own perseverance. On my way home, I stopped by the park where I used to jog late at night, hoodie pulled tight against the chill. The empty bench beneath the lamppost was untouched, a silent witness to my dark hours. I sat, breathing in the crisp air, and allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotion, grief for lost time, relief for vindication, and hope for what lay ahead. The path beyond the bench curved into darkness, but I sensed the sunrise waiting just beyond the horizon. Over the next week, life resumed its rhythms. I returned to work, greeted by emails from clients who had hesitated to trust me after the rumors, now clamoring to reconnect. My reputation, once marred by defamation, blossomed anew as people admired how I'd weathered the storm. At home, I started journaling again, pen-tracing affirmations of strength and chapters of growth. Words that once stumbled on the page now flowed with clarity, an echo of the courtroom testimony that had reasserted my voice. One evening, as I sorted through files, a knock came at the door. I opened it to find the barista from the cafe who had recorded part of the altercation. She held her phone aloft. "I wanted you to have this unedited clip," she said softly. The footage, capture of me standing calm while my ex raged, had become the linchpin of our case. I thanked her and watched her leave, realizing that allies often appear in the most unassuming forms. In the days that followed, I spoke at a women's support group about my experience, how lies can isolate you and how truth can set you free. Faces in the audience glowed with empathy, some brimming with tears, others with guarded hope. When I finished, a woman approached and hugged me tightly. "You gave me courage to stand up for myself." In that embrace, I understood that my battle echoed far beyond my own vindication. It fueled others to reclaim their voices. On my lonesome rooftop one night, I gazed at the city lights and felt a gentle stirring of excitement for what was to come. No longer tethered by fear, I began sketching ideas for a new chapter in my life, one that included real forgiveness, cautious but open friendships, and perhaps a love unscarred by slander. The sticky note on the ledge beside me still bore my old mantra, "Build her words small." I tore it down and replaced it with a fresh one, "Live your truth large." That replacement felt like a promise to myself. The echoes of the past would never vanish completely, but I'd learned to let them fuel forward motion rather than hold me back. Tomorrow, I would send the final motion for damages and draft the outline of my next memoir. But tonight, I simply breathed in the cool air, heart settled in the steady rhythm of someone who'd reclaimed their life. The dawn sun filtered through half-open blinds as I lay on my couch, phone in hand and inbox overflowing with messages affirming the jury's decision. 2 prominent legal journals had already published summaries of the case, praising the clarity of the evidence and the robustness of our motion for damages. Carla called me at 8 a.m. with details. The court had scheduled a hearing to assess compensatory damages for reputational harm, a date set only 3 weeks away. I dressed carefully for our meeting at a downtown law office, choosing a tailored suit that mirrored the one I wore on the day of the verdict. In the glass-walled conference room, spreadsheets and case precedents were spread before me like a mosaic of numbers and legal citations. Financial experts testified remotely via video conference, explaining how the defamation had cost me consulting contracts and social invitations that once shaped my life. The expert attached a detailed projection worksheet showing a measurable decline in my annual income, a decline directly tied to the malicious stories spread about my mental stability. As I reviewed the figures, I felt a mix of vindication and unease. Vindicated that truth could be quantified, uneasy at the tangible weight of damage wrought by lies. Carla walked me through the anticipated range of awards, from nominal sums to significant punitive damages meant to deter future misinformation. She reminded me that while financial restitution could never fully erase the pain of public humiliation, it would serve as a formal acknowledgement of the harm inflicted. I nodded as she explained the submission requirements, each signature and declaration a step toward the closure I'd fought so hard to attain. After the meeting, I navigated busy sidewalks to a nearby cafe where a group of former colleagues awaited my arrival. They greeted me with warm embraces, offering congratulations and updates on how the defense had inspired others to pursue their own battles against false accusations. Over coffee, I listened to stories of community members reclaiming their voices, individuals who had suffered from online slander and found courage in our victory. Their words reinforced a broader truth. Our case transcended personal vindication and had ignited a small but growing movement toward accountability. That afternoon, I returned to my writing desk, determined to chronicle this journey with the same precision I'd used to build my legal arsenal. I opened a new document titled Reclaiming My Narrative and began typing, each word a brick reinforcing the fortress of my restored self. The rhythm of the keys felt familiar, like a second heartbeat, reminding me that truth once hidden could resonate powerfully when given form. As evening settled, I took a long walk along the riverbank, the water's reflective surface a mirror to the journey of lies and truths that had defined the past months. I paused beneath a lamppost, its warm glow framing ripples on the water and whispering that even the darkest waters reflect light when given time. With the damages hearing looming, I felt prepared, grounded by the knowledge that every narrative strand we'd gathered would weave an unassailable defense. Resting my palm on the cold metal railing, I whispered to the river and to myself, "My story is mine again," a quiet vow carried away by the current. The morning of the damages hearing began with rain-soaked sidewalks and a chill wind that seemed to echo my lingering apprehension. I arrived early at the courthouse, its facade towering like a fortress, guarding the administration of justice. Carla greeted me with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile, her confidence a balm to my fraying nerves. Inside, we met with our legal team near the counsel table, reviewing exhibits and ensuring each document was precisely tabbed and ready. The courtroom gallery filled quickly with reporters, supporters, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness the final chapter of the defamation saga. The bailiff called the session to order, and Judge Thompson, presiding with an air of impartial authority, invited Carla to present the compensatory claim. Carla spoke with eloquence, citing case law and precise calculations of lost income and reputational harm supported by expert analysis. As she laid each chart before the jury, I watched the expressions of the insurance adjuster and financial advisor shift from skepticism to solemn acknowledgement. Next, the forensic accountant took the stand, a composed figure in a crisp suit, presenting detailed reconciliations of bank statements and contract timelines. Under direct examination, he explained how consulting fees had plummeted by 40% during the 6-month period of public allegations. His poised testimony carried weight as he addressed challenges to his methodology, affirming the integrity of his projections. On cross-examination, opposing counsel attempted to undermine his credibility by pointing to market fluctuations, but the accountant countered with comparative data from control periods. The gallery remained hushed as Carla introduced the psychologist who specialized in trauma caused by reputational attacks, establishing the non-economic impact of defamation. The psychologist described symptoms of anxiety and social withdrawal I had endured, linking them directly to the false statements circulated by my ex. She supported her conclusions with standardized assessment scores and interviews with friends who observed my gradual retreat from public life. Attempts by the defense to frame these findings as subjective opinions were deftly countered by her citation of peer-reviewed research on defamation's psychological toll. As final testimony, Carla called me back to the stand to address the remaining question of punitive damages, asking me to speak to the lasting consequences of his malice. I cleared my throat and recounted nights spent awake, replaying his lies and questioning my own mind, a torment that no financial award could erase. Yet I explained how the hearing itself had given me a renewed sense of agency, transforming my anguish into a platform for vindication and advocacy. My voice remained steady, buoyed by the certainty that the truth I spoke would guide the jury's heart as well as their sense of justice. Carla's closing argument wove together threads of testimony, expert analysis, and my personal narrative into a compelling case for comprehensive relief. She urged the jury to consider not only the monetary losses, but also the ethical imperative to deter future defamation, appealing to both logic and conscience. The room fell silent when she ended with a poignant reminder: words carry power, and lies carry consequences. The bailiff excused the jury to deliberate, and as the doors closed, I felt a momentary calm before the storm of anticipation. Outside the courtroom, reporters clamored for statements, but I only offered a brief smile and a simple acknowledgement of gratitude for everyone who stood by me. Carla and I found a quiet corner in the hallway, where she praised my composure and reminded me that regardless of the outcome, our efforts had already made an impact. The minutes stretched into hours, and I spent part of the time journaling my reflections, each word a tether keeping me grounded in reality. In the hush before the verdict, I realized that the true measure of restitution went beyond dollars. It lay in the restoration of my own peace of mind. When the jury returned, their faces bore the solemnity of individuals who had weighed every piece of evidence with care and rigor. The foreperson delivered the verdict, awarded full compensatory damages, acknowledging both economic losses and psychological suffering, with a punitive component to punish malice. A wave of relief and vindication surged through me as Carla signed the official order, her eyes brimming with pride at the closure we'd secured. Walking out into the crisp, late afternoon air, I felt more whole than I had in months, carried forward by the knowledge that truth and perseverance had prevailed. 2 months after the damages award, the morning light felt softer as I opened my apartment window to a stirring breeze and the distant hum of city life. The courtroom battles had receded into memory, but the lessons they imparted continued to shape every decision I made. Today, I was launching a small non-profit dedicated to supporting individuals facing defamation and online harassment, a project born from the very ashes of my ordeal. I slipped into a crisp blazer and glanced at the sticky note on my desk, now faded, in which I had scribbled months ago, "Live your truth, large." Below it, a fresh note read, "Empower others to speak," a daily reminder of the mission I had embraced. By 9 a.m., I arrived at the co-working space where the launch event was scheduled, the lobby alive with potted plants and sunlight filtering through broad windows. Volunteers bustled around, setting up name tags and arranging chairs in a semicircle, each action a testament to collective hope rather than solitary struggle. Carla Martinez, my unwavering ally, greeted me with a warm hug and flipped through the event program one last time. She smiled and said, "This initiative will give voice to those who've felt silenced," a sentiment that mirrored my own journey from isolation to advocacy. As participants filed into the room, I recognized familiar faces. Alan, whose testimony had been pivotal, and the barista whose footage had exposed my ex's threats. Their presence filled me with gratitude, a reminder that allies often emerge from unexpected chapters of our lives. I began with a brief introduction, recounting how a single lie had nearly destroyed my world, and how truth, once revealed, can become a cornerstone for collective healing. Each sentence carried echoes of the courtroom's gravity, balanced by the lightness of newfound purpose. Next, I invited a psychologist, Dr. Maya Reynolds, to speak about the psychological impact of defamation and strategies for rebuilding self-worth. Her presentation wove clinical insight with compassionate anecdotes, offering attendees practical steps to regain confidence after reputational harm. I watched as eyes glistened and pens scribbled notes, each person absorbing tools to navigate their own storms of doubt. Moments like these transformed academic research into tangible lifelines, bridging the gap between theory and lived experience. After a short break, we held breakout sessions where participants shared personal stories, forming small circles of empathy and solidarity. A young woman named Sophia recounted her ordeal with viral rumors and spoke of sleepless nights haunted by whispers of her community. As she spoke, her voice quivered but then strengthened, buoyed by nods of understanding from others who had faced similar attacks. When I briefly joined her circle, she grasped my hand and whispered, "Your victory gave me hope," a moment that felt more rewarding than any courtroom triumph. Following the breakout, Carla and I led a workshop on legal recourse and evidence preservation, sharing templates for documenting incidents of defamation. Volunteers distributed printed guides and USB drives preloaded with sample affidavits and witness statement outlines. I demonstrated how to organize email threads, timestamps, and digital records to create a compelling case for legal advisors. Each nod from the audience reflected the empowering shift from helplessness to proactive defense of personal dignity. As the afternoon sun dipped low, we reconvened for closing remarks, and I felt a surge of emotion wash over me. I recapped the journey from the first whisper at Marcus's party to the echoing "guilty" that had shattered my ex's lies. Then I spoke of the work ahead, ensuring that no one else felt forced into silence by malicious rumors. My final words were a pledge. Together, we will build a community where truth is defended and every voice matters. After the event, attendees lingered in the lobby, exchanging contact information and promising mutual support. A local journalist approached to schedule an interview for a feature on our nonprofit's launch, signaling wider recognition of the cause. I agreed, mindful that media attention could amplify our efforts and attract resources for those in need. That evening, I returned to my rooftop sanctuary, the city lights gleaming like a galaxy of second chances. I pressed my palm against the cool railing where I'd once stacked sticky notes of doubt, now cleared away to make room for new purpose. Under the vast sky, I reflected on the alchemy of adversity, how lies had forged a newfound commitment to justice and community. I reached into my pocket for a fresh sticky note and scrawled, "From ashes, we rise as one." As midnight approached, I closed my eyes and allowed the hum of distant traffic to lull my thoughts into a steady rhythm. I recalled the judge's words at the verdict, an affirmation of my sanity, and understood now how that moment had been a gateway rather than a destination. My narrative had shifted from solitary defense to collective empowerment, transforming personal scars into a blueprint for resilience. In the days that followed, our non-profit gained traction. Social media campaigns spotlighted survivor stories, and partnerships with legal clinics offered pro bono consultations. I balanced this work with rebuilding my professional portfolio, taking on new consulting projects that celebrated integrity and transparency. Each successful campaign became a testament to how truth, once harnessed, could propel both personal and communal growth. Late one afternoon, I received a handwritten note slipped under my door, bearing a familiar script and the simple words, "Thank you for restoring what was broken." It was from Emma, whose own path of healing I had encouraged through our non-profit's outreach. A reminder that forgiveness can bloom even after harrowing trials. In that moment, I realized that the journey from whispered doubt to shared purpose had woven us into an unexpected tapestry of redemption. As Chapter 6 draws to a close, I stand on the threshold of new beginnings, fortified by truth and guided by the promise that even the fiercest lies can be melted away by collective conviction. The story continues, not as a solitary battle, but as a shared chronicle of resilience, empathy, and the unwavering belief that no falsehood can overshadow a voice raised in solidarity. The morning after our non-profit's first anniversary event, the inbox held another surprise, a message from Emma, proposing a collaborative workshop on healing from public defamation, a bridge I hadn't dared hope to build. We met in a sunlit community center, adorned with posters detailing mental health and legal rights resources. Emma, no longer guarded, greeted me with a tentative smile and a box of her grandmother's herbal tea blends, a peace offering steeped in apology and hope. As we set out name badges and arranged chairs, she confessed how organizing support circles had shown her the depths of my pain and the strength it took to stand truth again. Her voice trembled as she recounted late nights spent researching organizations that offered legal counsel to defamation survivors, like the Legal Service for Independent Media's Pro Bono Network and Justice Connect's specialized training for nonprofits. I listened, heart-warming at her sincerity, and realized this partnership could amplify the cause we'd both come to champion. The workshop began with a grounding exercise led by a trauma-informed facilitator, inviting participants to share one word describing their emotional state. Betrayed, anxious, hopeful, each term a thread weaving a complex tapestry of collective experience. Emma and I co-led the next session, blending legal primer with mindfulness techniques. I outlined steps to document defamation incidents and secure evidence, while she demonstrated brief breathing practices to calm anxiety during legal proceedings. When I described how to organize email chains and time-stamped messages for a compelling case, participants scribbled notes, their eyes flicking between guides I prepared and the tear-slick faces around me. Emma then guided us through a reflective journaling prompt. Write a letter to the version of yourself silenced by lies, urging attendees to reclaim agency with each penned word. By midday, small groups formed organically, sharing stories of reputational harm on social media, workplace rumors, and community gossip that had left them questioning their own sanity. A young man named Leo admitted he'd considered dropping out of college after false accusations about his conduct. He held up a binder of preserved screenshots, asking for legal advice on sending a formal cease and desist letter, an affirmation that our non-profit's resources had empowered him to act. Emma offered to pair him with a volunteer lawyer from the Vance Center's network, while I connected him with templates for drafting his own demand letter. The final session centered on future steps, creating peer support pods, establishing a moderated online forum, and drafting a policy brief to present to local policymakers advocating for stronger anti-defamation laws. Emma and I outlined a roadmap for a city-wide coalition of survivors, legal experts, and counselors, ensuring no one faced the labyrinth of defamation alone. As chairs were stacked and supplies packed away, Emma turned to me, eyes bright. "Thank you for trusting me," she said softly, the weight of unspoken history lifting between us. I nodded, realizing trust was the final cornerstone in the reconstruction of our relationship, built not on romantic spirals, but on mutual purpose and renewed respect. That evening, over herbal tea scented with chamomile and lavender, Emma and I drafted a joint op-ed announcing our workshop's success and calling for national support for defamation survivors. Her words flowed with sincerity. We learned that restoring dignity begins with telling the truth and ends by lifting each other. I added details of the legal frameworks we'd navigated, ensuring the piece was both heartfelt and practical. The next morning, local news covered our co-authored op-ed, spotlighting individual stories and the novel collaboration between survivor-turned-advocate and former defendant-turned-partner. Walking to the community center at dawn, I carried a fresh, sticky note reading, "From vulnerability, we find strength," and placed it above my desk alongside "Live Your Truth Large." Inside, the walls bore framed thank you letters from participants whose lives had regained shape after months of fear and silence. Emma arrived with coffee and a stack of printouts, data from our first workshop showing 85% of attendees felt better equipped to face their cases. We reviewed the figures, sharing a smile that spoke volumes. This was redemption not just for me, but for every voice once drowned by deceit. As mid-morning sun bathed the room, I realized that this chapter, rooted in reconciliation and shared mission, had become the most powerful of all, a testament to how truth, once fractured, can be reforged into solidarity. 6 months after our joint workshop, autumn's golden hour filtered through the tall windows of our newly established resource center, painting the room in amber hues. Banners outside proclaimed, "Voices Restored, Center for Defamation Survivors," a testament to how far we'd come from courtroom battles and whispered lies. As I unlocked the front door, the lightness of purpose pulsed through me. This place was more than brick and mortar. It was a cathedral of second chances. Inside, volunteers arranged legal guidebooks on oak shelves and set up a digital kiosk where survivors could upload evidence securely, each keystroke a brick, laying the path to vindication. Emma appeared with 2 steaming mugs of spiced cider, her eyes reflecting the same quiet resolve I'd first recognized in that basement party, now tempered by months of collaboration. We nodded to each other in silent greeting, the air between us humming not with unspoken fear, but mutual conviction. By noon, our first community meeting convened. 30 participants seated in a circle, faces etched with stories of betrayal and resolve. I guided the opening, reminding everyone that here, truth is their shield and solidarity their sword. Words that once trembled on my lips, now spoken with unshakable clarity. Emma followed with a segment on self-care, teaching participants how to anchor their emotions with mindfulness exercises before delving into legal strategy. The mingled scent of cider and falling leaves sneaked in through the door as I facilitated breakout discussions on evidence collection, each survivor sharing unique methods, from screenshots to text logs, that had saved their sanity. After the meeting, I retreated to my office, where a press release awaited my final edits. A local television station planned to air a segment on our center's impact, complete with survivor interviews and legal experts, lauding our model as innovative and necessary. As I polished the statement, reminding potential donors that every contribution extended a lifeline to voices drowning in defamation's tide, the door tapped softly. My ex's lawyer stood there, crisp in his tailored suit. He offered a curt nod and handed me a sealed envelope without meeting my gaze, an unexpected gesture that made my pulse hitch. Inside, the legal department's head wrote that he withdrew his appeal and offered to cover our center's operational costs for a year, acknowledging that our work served justice in ways his procurement of punitive damages could never achieve. I stared at the letter, a bridge built from the ashes of conflict to the promise of institutional support. Emma entered behind me, her smile bright as the midday sun, and together we realized that our story had come full circle, from defamation's ruin to advocacy's renewal. Later, I joined Carla at a televised panel discussion. Under bright studio lights, we spoke of defamation as a public health issue, citing research on reputational harms, psychological toll, and the need for legal reforms to protect truth-tellers. Viewers flooded social media with messages of gratitude, tagging survivors who found courage in our words and pledging donations for our center. That night, as autumn's chill deepened, I stood on my rooftop once more, sticky note in hand, this time inscribed, "In every shadow so light." Below, the city pulsed with life, each window a story waiting to be told, each voice beneath the noise a testament to resilience. In that moment, I felt the quiet thrill of a life reclaimed and a purpose embraced, ready to write the chapters that lay ahead, not alone, but in chorus, with every survivor who dared to speak their truth. Morning light spilled through vaulted windows as I walked into the center's main hall, where sunlight illuminated rows of seating arranged in a perfect semicircle for today's milestone gathering. 2 years earlier, those seats would have remained empty, haunted by shame and fear. Now they brimmed with survivors whose lives had been reclaimed by truth and solidarity. A banner overhead read, "From Silence to Strength, Annual Voices Restored Symposium," marking a full-circle moment from the first hushed workshop we held in a cramped community room. I took my place at the podium, heart steady, and welcomed every face, each a testament to perseverance against defamation's corrosive tide. Beside me stood Emma, her profile softened by months of collaborative purpose rather than past accusation, a living reminder of reconciliation's power. We opened with a combined address. I recounted our initial courtroom battles and the spark that ignited a movement, while Emma shared how healing bridges could be built on shared vulnerability. Next, we unveiled a digital bulletin showcasing success stories. Film editors cleared of viral rumors, small business owners whose reputations were restored, and community leaders emboldened to speak truth to power. Volunteers distributed booklets detailing new online courses on evidence preservation and legal self-advocacy, a curriculum grown from our early templates and refined by survivor feedback. The room buzzed as attendees exchanged contacts, forming support pods that extended well beyond the symposium's scheduled sessions. In a surprise announcement, Carla Martinez revealed the launch of a scholarship fund for law students committed to pro bono defamation defense, ensuring our work continued in capable hands. Tears glistened in my eyes as I realized this initiative would train future advocates to wield truth like a shield, multiplying our impact exponentially. After a reflective break, participants joined breakout groups to draft policy recommendations, calling for national standards on online defamation and funding for survivor support services. By afternoon, local media captured moments of raw emotion and strategic planning, broadcasting our collective resolve to a wider audience. When closing remarks began, I stepped forward and spoke of the journey from whispered lies to a chorus of restored voices, urging everyone to carry this flame into their communities. Emma followed, her final words echoing in the hall. Our scars are maps to resilience, guiding others through dark terrain towards solidarity's light. As we embraced on stage, applause filled the space, not just for our achievements, but for the promise that through unity, even defamation's worst shadows could be transformed into beacons of hope. The Center's annual impact report showed a 150% increase in survivors served and a 200% growth in volunteer lawyers year over year, evidence that our mission resonated far beyond our expectations. In the soft glow of morning, I reviewed the latest metrics. Over 500 legal consultations delivered, 200 attendees at workshops, and a 95% satisfaction rate among participants, confirming that structured support can restore both reputation and hope. Emma joined me in the main hall as we prepared for a virtual press conference, announcing partnerships with 3 national law schools to launch pro bono clinics dedicated to defamation cases, a milestone signaling our evolution from grassroots project to national movement. We opened the conference by recounting our journey, From a single courtroom battle to a thriving network that had empowered thousands to reclaim their voices, and the applause that followed felt like validation of every risk we had taken. Following the event, I met Carla on the rooftop where our story began, the city skyline bathed in sunset hues, and we celebrated the center's nomination for the Civic Impact Award, an honor that recognized our collective perseverance and service to justice. Our laughter mingled with the evening breeze as we reflected on the countless moments of doubt overcome by truth. Every step of our arduous path embodied in the newfound confidence of survivors we'd guided. That night, I drafted a keynote address for the awards ceremony, weaving data points with personal testimonies. A client who regained her teaching career after clearing her name, a small business owner whose online reputation was restored, and a family reunited when defamatory rumors were dispelled. I paused, hand hovering over the final sentence, and added, "May our work continue to shine light into defamation's darkest corners and affirm that every voice once broken can rise with dignity." With the draft complete, I affixed a new sticky note above my desk, "Legacy of Truth," a concise reminder of the impact we'd laid as the foundation for future advocates. 1 year later, our center operated out of 3 regional offices, each staffed by rotating teams of lawyers, counselors, and survivors turned mentors, a testament to how individual resilience can cultivate systemic change. I found myself mentoring incoming volunteers, sharing lessons learned about evidence gathering, courtroom etiquette, and the power of narrative truth to sway both judges and public opinion. Emma, now our Director of Community Outreach, spearheaded a nationwide digital campaign that increased hotline calls by 300%, ensuring that help was never more than a click away for anyone facing defamation. Our annual symposium had grown into a multi-day conference, hosting international experts on media law, digital rights, and trauma-informed support practices, signaling that our local effort had blossomed into a global coalition for justice. Late one evening, I stood on the stage of the conference hall, the seats empty but echoing with memories of impassioned discussions, when I felt a hand on my shoulder, Carla, smiling at the journey we'd shared. In that quiet moment, I realized that our story was not confined to legal victories or restored reputations, but lived on in every life touched, every voice emboldened, and every truth reclaimed. As I looked out at the darkened rows, I whispered into the stillness, "This is just the beginning," embracing the promise that our work would continue to ripple outward, transforming doubt into determination wherever injustice arose.